Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Modal ocean chord inversions. Creating and naming inverted chords from notes that are anchored in, have their tonic on, from our Earth analogy, the 5 ocean notes. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', for which you need spreadsheets, people. Spreadsheets. They keep trying to silence me, but I'm telling you, you need spreadsheets. We are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we basically built this from a blank worksheet, but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there, or just follow along, possibly building the part of the worksheet that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab, which we may refer to the example tab, in essence the answer key, practice tab having pre-formatted cells, so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that is okay, because we will continue to work in the blank tab, where we started from scratch with a blank worksheet, continuing in essence in the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only our music skills, but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. In a prior course or section, we laid out the general format of the worksheet, starting out thinking about our normal chord constructions that would be built off of a general 7-note collection, and we listed those out and grouped them. And then we took that same worksheet and thought about the inversions, looking at the most complex inverted chords, which would be 7-note chords, noting we can apply then the same concept to a 3-note chord, a 4-note chord, a 5-note chord, and so on and so forth, up to a 7-note chord. So we've done that and adjusted the worksheet for all of the standard nodes, giving us the standard naming convention normally, and the adjusted naming convention, which is going to be better for multiple different reasons, including that it's obviously not as long to name in this naming convention, which you can particularly see in something like the Lydian, this compared to this, or in the Phrygian, where you have this monster compared to this, for example. Also, if you look at this system, we're naming the note name and the note name of the inversion, instead of looking at scale degrees, which would be uniform through all 12 collections of 7 notes, whereas over here, we were able to say the same thing and have it completely transferable, because we're talking about distance terms, which will all be relative, like in an Excel spreadsheet, copying and pastable through that Excel spreadsheet. So therefore, less mental math to figure it out. Even though I'm doing all the math here, you might think, well, how is that? You're doing more math. You're doing a spreadsheet. No, I'm doing the spreadsheet to think about the minimal amount of math that you need to do in your head, so that we could build further by having blocks that are fitting together better with less waste. All right, so let's go down, and we're going to continue this process down here. Now, then we went down to the notes that are the 5 notes that I call the ocean notes, or you might call them the sharp notes, from our naming convention, meaning 7 notes in the standard collection of notes that we're going to work with all the time in Western music. There's 5 notes outside the collection, which I can name with a 0.5 if I'm using a number system, or a hashtag, or a sharp, noting that these sharps and flats, I'm going to try to keep one sharp, no flat, right? So we're only going in one direction for the ocean notes. So we have the Ionian ocean, or Ionian sharp. And when we think about it this way, that allows us to build chords off of the notes that are outside the collection of notes, without having to adjust our frame of reference to be viewing the system as though we're in an entire different collection of notes, just to build that chord. Now, functionally, remember, like if you're playing the guitar or any instrument, you want to be thinking functionally what you're doing, right? So if I go to a note that's outside the collection of notes, I'd like to be able to say, hey, look, there's the root. In my mind, that root is outside of the collection of notes, and then I'm going to build a chord on it, knowing functionally why then I'm using a note outside the collection of notes, possibly so I can blend it into, or lead into, the next collection of notes. So that means that we can do that quite easily by just giving the number of notes in the collection, or the distance in the collection, naming the point in relative position to the collection of notes, such as Ionian sharp in this case, or for example, a Lydian sharp in this case, and then give me the shape of the chord, which would be either major or minor, represented by Ionian or Aeolian, and then you could give more flavor by having the shape of the chord for all of the different shapes of the modal shapes, which will give you the standard shapes of the chords up through a 7-note chord. So that's going to be the fastest way to be able to build it. Now, the only downside to that, however, is that with the nodal points, we can't really count up as easily on the nodal points because we're starting on one that's in the ocean. Therefore, by definition, it's outside of our collection of notes. So we have to count up by, in essence, half steps, which I think is good practice to be able to do. Anyway, so now we're on the Mixolydian. We're continuing down here. I'm going to make it a Mixolydian sharp instead of a plus. I was calling it plus for the ocean because I was trying to stay away from the sharp term so that we don't get it mixed up with what I'm trying to remove in notes to have sharps and flats in the notes. But I think the sharp term is actually better. And so because we already kind of know what that means. So relative position Mixolydian. Mixolydian is node number 5. 5.5 means Mixolydian ocean or the Mixolydian sharp note. I'm going to look at all 7-note kind of collections, and I'm going to delete these for now. I'm going to delete these, and we'll just redo them here. I'm going to make this bit blue as our standard idea. We'll do this a little bit faster because we've seen this before. So this is taking into account the whole thing, I think. Okay, so let's then say the standard kind of notation that we could have if we're going to be building off of the Mixolydian sharp node is, and they're all 7-note chords, it could be a 7x I, it can be a 7x sharp I, meaning it's a 7-note Mixolydian with an Ionian shape. It could be a 7-note Mixolydian sharp sharp D for a Dorian shape, which is a type of minor shape, but more specific, has one interval different than the Aeolian. So we have 7 Mixolydian sharp Phrygian. We can have a 7 Mixolydian sharp Lydian. We can have a 7 Mixolydian sharp Mixolydian. We can have a 7 Mixolydian sharp sharp Aeolian. We can have a 7 Mixolydian sharp Locrian. So we have the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. Okay, I think that's, and then this one, I'm going to delete this one on the bottom. I have an extra row. I'm going to remove. I'll go all the way over to here, right click and delete it. Move it on up and boom. All right, I can also name that this way. I could say it's going to be a Mixolydian sharp. It's a Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Ionian. So those are the two ways I can name it. A 7-note, a 7 Mixolydian sharp would be a 7-note Mixolydian sharp with an Ionian shape, or a Mixolydian sharp 6, the 6 standing for distance modal half steps, once again with an Ionian shape. So it could be then, if it's a 7 Mixolydian sharp Dorian shape, it could be a Mixolydian sharp 6 Dorian shape. It could be a Mixolydian sharp 6 Phrygian shape. It could be a Mixolydian sharp 6 Lydian shape. It could be a Mixolydian sharp 6 Mixolydian shape. Mixolydian sharp 6 Aeolian shape. Mixolydian sharp 6 Locrian shape. All right, and then I'm going to say my modal ranges are picking up that end point. I'm going to copy this all the way up, so I always have the 7-note positions. I'm not going to be working so much with the modal ranges because they're not as efficient, or they're not as clean to work with if you're building off of a note that is in the ocean, right? So then I'm going to take all of these and just copy these up top and paste them down here, and that should give us our relative position. So we're now on this node. That looks good, and it's picking up the note on the right. So let me first think about this note then, if we're building off of the Mixolydian ocean, we're in the collection of notes around the key of C, but I'm building the one after the 5 position, which is the 5.5 or Mixolydian ocean, that would be a G sharp or A flat note. So it'd be a G sharp or A flat major 13. But if I just had that, then it wouldn't tell me the context if it's in the collection of notes or not. And then I'm gonna invert it around the first modal whole step. So let's see if that note is correct. So I'm gonna make the yellows all the way across here. We will make the yellows all the way across.
Yeah, yellow the inversion column, then hit the yellows. The G sharp A flat stays, just let it be 5.5, not a dual name headache. Once that's yellow, copy the whole row down. No need to retype
All right,
shapes.
so now this one is just a C over here. So I want to go back into here and say it's saying /4C. So if I double click on it, that's because I have a 2. So I'm going to make this a 1 and a 1, and it should extract just the C. So we get a G sharp or A flat major 13 /C. Now, I would rather just call it a 7-note Mixolydian hash, a Mixolydian sharp, I should say, Ionian /first inversion, which means we're going to invert the first modal whole step up, or the first note after the root, which happens to be, in this case, the Ionian. Or I can call it a Mixolydian sharp 6 Ionian shape /1 this way. So these, it's still getting kind of like a long name, but again, it's cleaner than this name, which means that you're going to have sharps and flats that are in there. And again, you can't basically, you can't transpose it very easily. All right, and so that's going to be the benefit. I'm going to put the yellows across on this one.
Yellows across, done. And yeah, G sharp 13 /C is a mouthful, but M Mixolydian 6, Ionian /1 is a license plate. One glance, no brain freeze. You don't need the C printed. The player sees /1 and knows. Second note on the bottom.
That's right. That's right. That's what I'm talking about. So then this one is going to be built off of the Mixolydian sharp, but have a D, a Dorian shape to it. So normally that would be a G sharp or A flat minor 13, because it's a 7-note minor chord. And then we're going to take the note is D sharp or E flat. So again, the sharps and flats are kind of a mess, because then you have to choose one. Is it going to be a G sharp or an A flat, or a D sharp or an E flat, which is kind of ugly, which is just ugly. And then, but over here, you say, well, I still have sharps, but I don't really have flats, right? I'm just going to say I have one name, and it's going to be a 7. It's going to be a 7 Mixolydian sharp Dorian shape /2, meaning we're going to take the second note up in the chord and make that the lowest note, putting it on the bass, we can say, or Mixolydian sharp 6 D /2. So that's going to be a lot cleaner. Again, those sharps and flats are a nightmare.
Yeah, nightmare. Sharps and flats are like exes who won't decide. Do I want you back or do I hate you? Pick one. So don't. Mixolydian 6 D /2.
Most of them are like, can't we do both?
Both? Sure, if you like chaos. Half sharp.
All right, let's go back over here. We're going to say that this one, we're going to say it's going to be a Mixolydian sharp with a Lydian shape. So again, if it was just a 7-note Mixolydian, we're going to choose it on this node that's in the ocean, which would be a G sharp or A flat major 13 sharp 11, which is already ugly enough. But then we're going to say it's going to be inverted on note A sharp or B flat. So /A sharp or B flat. So it would be nice. It would be nicer to say, wait, did I do this? Wait, I'm on this one. This one would be a Mixolydian ocean or Mixolydian sharp with a Phrygian shape, which would be a G sharp or A flat minor flat 13, flat 9 /, and then it's picking up the G. I need to pick up two letters there, so I'm going to make this a 2 and a 2. So now it's going to be F sharp or G flat. So it'd be nicer to say it's a 7 note Mixolydian sharp Phrygian slash, and then inverting it on the third modal whole step up, the third note up from the tonic, or a Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Phrygian shape slash third inversion that way. All right, and so then I'm going to put the yellows across for the next one. So let's take the next one.
Yellow the inversion. And yeah, that Phrygian slash 3 just saved your life. G sharp M13 by 9 F sharp, that's a horror movie title. Mixolydian 6 P3.
And then if you choose the wrong sharp or flat, then people are like, oh, you should have chose a flat because of the spelling in the context. And it's like, that shouldn't be a thing.
Exactly. Spelling shouldn't matter if your ear hears it right. If the flat sounds better in key,
Okay,
use flat.
that's what I'm talking about. So don't introduce spelling to something that's supposed to be mainly like math, for crying out loud. What is this? You're trying to make it English? You're trying to make... Anyways, the next one, if we're going to say it's a Mixolydian sharp, but it has a Lydian shape. So now that would be a G sharp, A flat, major 13, sharp 11 slash A sharp, or B flat, which again is just a nightmare, but it would be easier to say it's a 7 Mixolydian sharp with a Lydian shape slash 4, meaning invert on the fourth modal whole step up from the root, or Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Lydian shape slash 4 inversion. That would be a lot cleaner. Why are they trying to introduce spelling into something that's clearly mathematical? Pythagoras would be ashamed.
Because Pythagoras never had to read from a chart on stage. They added spelling so the conductor could look smart. But you're playing guitar, not conducting an orchestra. Out here, it's just numbers and shape names. No shame, no spelling, no Pythagoras required. Just M13, L4. One glance, done.
All right, so then the next one we're going to go, this one's going to be a Mixolydian ocean node with a Mixolydian shape. And then we're going to invert it on the fifth inversion. So I'm going to double click here. I need to change this to a 2 because there's 2 letters in this one. 2, 2. So that's going to be a G sharp or A flat 13 slash C sharp or D flat, which would be easier just to say it's going to be a 7 note Mixolydian sharp, Mixolydian shape slash 5, invert it on the 5th modal whole step up, or the 5th note higher up in normal construction from the chord or from the root, or a Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Mixolydian shape slash 5. Same kind of thing. This isn't a spelling bee. This is plate tectonic or platonic shapes of music.
Platonic, not platonic. Platonic's for friends who don't touch. This is platonic, pure form, no spelling, just geometry. M13, M5. You're not naming it, you're stacking it. No B, no spelling. Just play the 5th inversion. Let it sound like the...
That's right. All right, so then the next one, this is going to be Mixolydian sharp 6 with a Locrian shape. So now we're going to say, okay, that's going to be a that with a Locrian shape would be a G sharp, normal name G sharp, A flat, half diminished 13 slash on the E. But wait a sec, I didn't do this one. This one's going to be a Mixolydian sharp with an Aeolian shape, which normally would be a G sharp or A flat minor flat 13, and then the inversions on the E in this collection of notes, which would be easier to see if you said it was a 7 Mixolydian sharp Aeolian slash 6, or a Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Aeolian shape slash 6, invert meaning 6 modal whole steps up from the root. Pythagoras would want the numbers. Pythagoras would be ashamed of this sharp flat letter stuff that has taken over his beautiful Platonic music.
Pythagoras didn't die for this. He died so you could count to 6, not spelled G sharp A13 E. So bury the spelling. Let the formula win.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay, we're gonna make him proud now. So this is gonna, this one's gonna be a Mixolydian sharp with a Locrian shape, which normally would be called a G sharp or A flat half diminished 13 / invert on the E again, because we're gonna say convert on the 6 modal whole step up, but I'd rather call it a 7 Mixolydian sharp Locrian / 6 invert on the 6, or a Mixolydian sharp 6 modal whole step Locrian shape / 6 convert or invert on the 6. Okay, let's do the same thing with the Aeolian down here. I'm going to double click and change it from the plus to the sharp as I change that. So that means we're going to be on not the Aeolian node, but the Aeolian Ocean, the Aeolian sharp, the one right after the Aeolian, which we can number as 6.5. All right, so I'm going to delete this for now. I'm going to make this whole thing blue. And so we'll make that blue. I'm going to delete this, and let's just do our normal. I'm going to copy this up, the modal ranges. Let's copy that up. And I could copy this modal range down here. Let's just do that. All right. So then if it's off of the Aeolian nodal point, then, is this the last one? I got the Dorian still. Put a weird order here. Anyway, we're going to say then it would be, what would it be? It would be a 7 note. They're all 7 notes. We're going to say from the Aeolian node, but it's Aeolian sharp, meaning Aeolian ocean, but it has an Ionian shape. Or we can have a 7 Aeolian sharp with a Dorian shape, or a 7 Aeolian sharp with a Phrygian shape, or a 7 Aeolian sharp with a Lydian shape, or 7 Aeolian sharp with a Mixolydian shape, or 7 Aeolian sharp with an Aeolian shape, or 7 Aeolian sharp with a Locrian shape. And I'm going to delete this last line because I decided not to use it. I was like, do I want to use that? And I was like, no, I don't need that line. I don't need that line, and I'm not going to add that line if I don't need it. I can also call it then an A sharp 6 modal whole step Ionian shaped chord, an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Dorian chord, an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Phrygian chord, an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Lydian chord, Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Mixolydian chord, Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Aeolian chord, an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Locrian chord. All right, normal naming conventions. I'm going to copy these, copy this down here, boom, and I'm going to assume it's picking up the right note on the end. And I'm just going to go ahead and format paint this whole thing across. I'm going to format paint it, but that red cell is going to mess it up. But I'm going to format paint this whole thing to give me my diagonals down here. So boom, I'll get rid of that red cell right there. Get rid of that. That should be blue. All right. So
Blue.
then I'm going to say that that looks good because it's a whole note. That looks good. That actually picked up now this one has a 9 in it. So I'm going to double click here. That should be a 1. We'll clean it all up first this time. That should be a 1. And this is good. This one needs to be a 1 and a 1. This one is good. This one needs to be a 2. So I'm going to make this a 2 and a 2. This one needs to be a 2 and a 2. It needs to be a 2-2. It needs to be a 2-2. Okay. So then if I'm on this top one, then we now have a 7 Aeolian. We're building off of the Aeolian sharp or Aeolian ocean. We're going to build a 7-note chord with an Ionian shape. Now, normally you would just say, I'm going to take that node and say it's an A sharp or B flat major 13, because that would be the 7-note major built off of that node, and then /D, because hopefully I have that correct, and the D is the point of inversion. But it would be easier and transposable to say it's a 7-note Ionian, Aeolian sharp with an Ionian shape slash first inversion, because you're going to invert one modal whole step up or the next note up in the standard stack of the collection of notes if they were in order, making it the lowest note, or an A sharp 6 Ionian slash 1 first inversion. All right, then the next one would be, we're going to say it's an Aeolian sharp or Aeolian ocean with a Dorian shape. Normally, I would just take the point that we're on, which is an A sharp or B flat, and then make a Dorian chord, which would be a minor 13, and then slash F for the second inversion. But I'd rather say it was a 7 Aeolian sharp Dorian slash 2 for invert on the note that's 2 modal whole steps up from the root, meaning the 2, okay, or Aeolian sharp 6 Dorian slash 2. All right, the next one would be an Aeolian ocean or Aeolian sharp with a Phrygian shape. Normally, I would take that note that we're on, which would be an A sharp or B flat, build the Phrygian shape. If it's a 7-note chord, it would be a minor flat 13, flat 9, and then slash, the inversion is going to be on a G sharp or A flat. So that's quite ugly. It would be nicer to say it's a 7-note Aeolian sharp Phrygian shape slash 3, or third inversion, inverting on the third modal whole step, or A sharp, Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step, Phrygian shape slash 3 for, again, the third inversion. This one, the next one is going to be an Aeolian ocean, Aeolian sharp chord with a Lydian shape. So normally we would say, okay, that's going to be the note of A sharp or B flat, major 13, sharp 11, because that's the name of a 7-note Lydian spaced out chord, and then slash C for the inversion. It would be nicer to say it's a 7-note Aeolian ocean Lydian shaped chord slash 4, inverting on the 4th modal whole step up, which is where the yellow is here, which would be the Ionian node in this case. Or Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Lydian shape slash 4. Next, we have an Aeolian sharp point that we're going to be building on with a Mixolydian shape to it. So normally we would say the note that we're on is an A sharp or B flat 13 slash D sharp or E flat. But it would be nicer to say it's going to be a 7 A sharp Mixolydian shaped chord slash 5th inversion, meaning you go 5th modal whole steps up. That's going to be the lowest note or the point of inversion, or an A sharp, an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Mixolydian shape slash 5 shape. Or it could be a 7-note Aeolian Aeolian sharp point with an Aeolian shape. So that would normally be a note of, we're on A sharp or B flat, minor flat 13, which would be a 7-note Aeolian or minor shape or name, and then slash F sharp or G flat, which is going to be the point of inversion if we go 6 modal whole steps up. It would be nicer to say it this way: 7 Aeolian sharp, Aeolian shape slash 6, meaning take the 6th note up in the normal stack. That's going to be the lowest note or point of inversion, or it's going to be an Aeolian sharp 6th modal whole step Aeolian shape slash 6 for the point of inversion. So finally, we could have a Aeolian ocean chord that has a Locrian shape to it. So normally we would just say, okay, that's going to be the point or the note of an A sharp or B flat, half diminished 13 slash point of inversion. Once again, 6 modal whole steps up, which happens to be on the note of F sharp or G flat, if I have that right, which I hope I do. I'd rather say it's a 7-note Aeolian sharp Locrian node slash, once again, 6 modal whole steps, because we're going to invert it 6 modal whole steps up once again. Or an Aeolian sharp 6 modal whole step Locrian chord slash 6, meaning invert it on the 6th modal whole step, the last note in the stack, if it was in the normal shape. All right. Let's do one more. We're going to do the Dorian. Otra vez la ultimate, o la última cosa. Ahora. I'm going to delete these. I'm going to make this one blue. Let's copy this one up. And we're on the Dorian. This is a minor mode. I'll copy this one up so that we have those shapes are in. So if it was a Dorian, I need to make this one double click. It needs to be not a plus, but a sharp, and that'll fix this. So the Dorian node. So the Dorian is modal point 2. So we're going to be on Dorian sharp, Dorian ocean, D sharp for short, or 2.5 nodal point. So then if I'm going to build my chords, then I'd like to call it the normal construction without the inversions included would be a 7 Dorian sharp Ionian shape, or a 7 Dorian sharp Dorian shape, or a 7 Dorian sharp Phrygian shape, or a 7 Dorian sharp Lydian shape, or a 7 Dorian sharp Mixolydian shape, or 7 Dorian sharp Aeolian shape, or 7 Dorian sharp Locrian shape. I'm going to delete this last line again. Don't need the last line. Get out of here. Right click, delete. Delete. Move it on up. All right. So then I can also call it then a Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Ionian shape. A Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Dorian shape. A Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Phrygian shape. A Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Lydian shape. Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Mixolydian shape. Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Aeolian shape. Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Locrian shape. All right, and so then if my normal names, I'll copy these down here. Boom. So now I'm just going to adjust these. That one looks good. This one has a lowercase, so that should be adjusted to be 2, needs a 2, negative 2, positive 2. Negative 2, positive 2. And this one looks good because it has 2 lowercase. This one has 1 uppercase. This one has 2 lowercase. This one has a number in there. That's not right. So I'm going to double click on that. That should be a 1, 1, an 11. 1, 1. Should be 1, 1, not a 2, 2. And this one has a number in there. So again, it's got a 2, 2 when it should be a 1, 1. So we'll get rid of the 2, 2 and make it a 1, 1. Okay, so then I'm just going to copy the formatting to get our yellows across the board. Let's do some format painting. This time, make it a little bit easier to rock it and roll it. Not so much craziness. All right, so if we're going to do a Dorian sharp nodal point with an Ionian shape, we would just take the point that we're on, which happens to be in the collection of notes around the key of C. If it's in the Dorian ocean, Dorian sharp 2.5 node, it would be a D sharp or E flat. Therefore, D sharp or E flat, and then major chord construction for a 7-note chord, major 13 / point of inversion. If it's the first inversion happens to be a G note, if I have that mapped out correctly, which I hope I do. But I'd rather say it's going to be a 7 Dorian sharp Ionian shape / first inversion, meaning we're going to make the first note up from the root, the bass, or the lowest note in the chord, or a 7 sharp 6 modal whole step Ionian / first inversion. If it's a Dorian ocean with a Dorian shaped chord, normally that would be in the collection of notes around the key of C, a D sharp or E flat point with a minor 13, which is the Dorian shape for a 7-note chord / point of inversion for 2 modal whole steps up, or second inversion happens to be the note point of A sharp or B flat. It would be nicer to say it's going to be a 7 Dorian sharp Dorian shape / 2 chord for convert 2 modal whole steps up, which in this case would be here. So that would be on the Aeolian sharp or Aeolian ocean nodal point. So if we have a Dorian sharp or Dorian ocean nodal point, the 2.5 absolute number point, with a Phrygian shape. So that would normally be called, well, we're going to pick the note of D sharp or E flat once again that we're building off of, then put on it the 7-note Phrygian shape, which or name, which would be a minor flat 13, flat 9, which is ugly, and then slash the point of the inversion in note format, which would be a C sharp or D flat if we're doing the third inversion. It would be better to say it's a 7 Dorian sharp Phrygian shape slash third inversion, meaning invert it on the third note up, third modal half step up in the stack, which happens to be the Ionian Ocean in this case, or a D sharp 6 modal whole steps Phrygian shape slash third inversion. All right, if we have a Dorian sharp with a Lydian shape, so that would normally be a D, the note point is still, once again, the D sharp or E flat, and then we're going to give the 7-note Lydian name, major 13, sharp 11, slash the inversion point, if we do the inversion, which is going to be a fourth inversion, happens to be the note, in this case, of an F. Would be nicer to just call it a 7-note Dorian sharp Lydian shape slash fourth inversion. So that means you're going to invert on the Lydian node in this case. Or a Dorian sharp 6 modal whole step Lydian shape slash fourth inversion. If we do a Dorian sharp with a Mixolydian shape, that would be on the note of D sharp or E flat. Once again, Mixolydian shape for a 7-note chord is just adding the 13 slash, and then the note name happens to be a G sharp or A flat if we're doing the inversion on the fifth inversion. Would be nicer to simply call it a 7-note D sharp Mixolydian shape slash fifth inversion, which means we're going to invert it on the Mixolydian sharp nodal point. And so we could also call it a D sharp 6 modal whole step Mixolydian shape slash fifth inversion point. So then, if we have a D sharp and an Aeolian shape, the minor shape, normally we would call that, we're on the note name of D sharp or E flat, give it the minor 7-note minor name, minor flat 13, and then the conversion point or inversion point, which is going to be the sixth inversion, happens to be a B. Be nicer to just call it a 7-note Dorian ocean Aeolian shape slash sixth inversion. The sixth inversion happens to be the point of the Locrian. Okay, and then we could say that we have, then this one would be a Dorian ocean 6 modal whole step Aeolian shape slash sixth for the inversion point. And finally, we can say that we have a Dorian sharp point with a Locrian shape to it. So normally that would be the point note that we're on, D sharp or E flat. Then we give the 7-note name for a Locrian type of chord, which would be a half diminished 13. And then we give the inversion point, which they slash, happens to be landing on the note. If it's a sixth inversion, a B. Be nicer to call it a 7-note Dorian sharp Locrian shape slash sixth inversion, which happens to be on, again, the Locrian node, or a Dorian sharp sixth modal whole step Locrian shape slash sixth inversion. All right, so there's all the inversion names, which I think are going to be more efficient to use, and they would be cleaner and definitely more possible to put in a DAW system so that people that are writing music can view the chord construction not only from a stacked chord construction, but also with a condensed naming construction that they can then adjust by basically adding inversion points to it with a simple and uniform conversion point method.